Hello and welcome to our channel, Marstream, your public performance broadcast platform. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also donate to our tip jar and support the arts and artist of Marstream by clicking the link below in the description. Check out our website, themarsh.org, for all upcoming live performances. Now, enjoy the show.
Let me introduce the wonderful Solo Arts Heal lead host who has done an incredible and brilliant job developing this program over the past year. Let's give a big virtual hug, shout out, applause to Mrs. Ms. Gail Shickele.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We made it a year. Did you ever think it would go on this long?
It's going to go on forever, Gail. Don't you worry.
Well, the show and the pandemic, just to be in the situation we're in, but it's been wonderful that we've been able to present this. And I am so grateful to you. We're happy to have everyone here tonight to celebrate with us in this 1-year anniversary of Solo Arts Heal on the Marstream. And it is the brainchild of Stephanie's, who's been at the forefront of presenting these performing arts pearls of healing during COVID. So I'm very grateful. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Gail.
And we're dedicating tonight's show to a shining star we recently lost, Amy Ostreicher, a woman of substance and an artist with a mission, as described in Memoriam by Broadway World. We'll be broadcasting a tribute show to Amy in the coming weeks, but wanted to include her here as her story intersects with the subject of our presentation tonight. Tonight's anniversary show features our illustrious first guest on Solo Arts Heal, returning with a new Zoom excerpt of her show, Sex and Power, Joanna Rush, followed in conversation with director Seth Wilpan about our fraught sexual landscape and how we can work together to stop the violence and heal our culture. April, I just learned, is Poetry Month, but April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And in Marstream style, last April 2020, we didn't hold back with programming in our first broadcast to address domestic and sexual violence, which have been continuing to surge under the conditions of the pandemic. Our hope is that all performances and talkbacks on Solo Arts Heal are filling a special role during this chaotic and uncertain time of pandemic, of hate crimes, of health issues, including the health crisis of climate change and our Mother Earth, which we also address now once a month. Solo Arts Heal is a theater of resilience, offering stories that celebrate the accessible and healing power of the arts, because it's through the arts we find the truth of our shared experiences and emotions, the grace, the humor, and the joy. And I cannot think of a better way to celebrate our anniversary than with Solo Arts Heal artist Joanna Rush in Sex and Power, and in a talkback with the show's director and Joanna's husband, Seth Wilpan. Let me tell you about Joanna. A playwright, actor, dancer, author, and interfaith minister, Joanna Rush probes the complexities of sex and power in our culture through her dynamic 75-minute monologue, an excerpt from which we'll see tonight. She, after enduring multiple sexual assaults, including both date rape and gang rape, Rush sought a deeper understanding of the root causes of sexual violence. Despite her trauma, she experienced a successful and varied career in both theater and film. As she performed various roles of seductress on stage and screen, she was exposed to additional misogyny and practiced internationally through history. Sex and Power covers territory from evolutionary biology to Greek mythology, as well as hilarious anecdotes from Rush's career. And she takes a cold, hard look, an honest look at rape culture, toxic masculinity, and the origins of sexual inequality, and ultimately inspires productive ways for both men and women to effect change. This one-woman phenomenon provides insights that will help heal today's sorry state of sexual affairs. Rush's creative, non-traditional outlook offers hope and a roadmap for how to propel the Me Too movement into a healthier sexual landscape for all of us. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the screen with excerpts from her show, Sex and Power, Joanna Rush.
Four guys jumped over the wall on Central Park South and grabbed my date and made him watch while they raped me. The day after the rape, my rockhead sister Laurel helped me cover up the cuts and bruises with makeup. Oh, honey, don't cry. Come on now. I know you're having a rough time. You think all men are like those creeps in the park? I don't know. Hell no. And the minute that curtain comes down, I want you to go right out there and report those little fuckers. I can't do that, Laurel. They're just kids. It could ruin their future. Are you kidding? You need a future too. And besides, if you don't report it, it could happen to somebody else. One time I was on a crowded number 11 bus on my way to an audition, and the guy next to me pressed up against me with the usual hard-on and started singing softly in my ear for everyone to hear. Some enchanted evening, you will meet a stranger across a crowd. And I'm really pretty shy, but I turned to him and belted, and somehow you'll know even then. He got off at the next stop, and I found a home in musical comedy, playing bad girls. But was I acting like a bad girl off stage as well as on? Because I experienced several other sexual assaults. What was wrong with me? In spite of my bad experiences with men, I wanted to have a family. So I got married and had a baby, a boy baby, Danny. I was aware that as a white boy, he would be automatically privileged. A sense of entitlement could cause him and everyone around him damage. I regret the times his father and I told him no, and we let him do what he wanted anyway. Were we planting the seeds for entitlement? Yes. But more importantly, we were teaching him how he could safely ignore the word no. One day, he wanted to take a short walk to the center of town. And I said, okay, but I can't carry you up the hill. We made an agreement that he would walk both ways. He walked all the way there and almost all the way back. When we got to the foot of the hill on our block, he said, carry me. No, we have an agreement. Carry me. No. Carry me. No. I sat on a neighbor's lawn, refusing to give in. I was so proud of myself. My husband thought I was crazy. I was crazy. I took pride in my ability to move on, but I could never stop thoughts from those past events from haunting me and wondering why those men had subjected me to such violence. Why did those guys rape me? What drove them? How were they capable of it? Was it a genetic relic from our primitive past? Was it this culture that's been shaped by men? These men did not seem to see me as a human being. Was it a right brain, left brain thing? Or was it a matter of pathology? The human population includes psychopaths and sociopaths. Not much you can do about that, unless you have a functional MRI machine and know how to use it. The amygdala is the part of the brain where emotions originate. In an fMRI image, a healthy amygdala looks like an almond. If the guy you're with looks more like a walnut, get the hell out of there. But if you don't have $1 million for an fMRI machine, then it pays to be aware of your date's resting heart rate and his blood pressure. If they're a little on the low side, he may need extra stimulation. Like if you'd be satisfied seeing a horror film, he may need actual horror. Oh, if, as they say, 1% of the population is psychopathic, I probably dated him. I just totally fell for charming, good-looking, charismatic men. I had no idea how to tell who it was safe to be with. It seems rape can have long-term effects. Post-traumatic stress, vertigo, tinnitus, vocal problems. My voice teacher pointed out how closely the vocal cords resemble the vagina. Vocal cords. Just seeing this connection gave me a deeper respect for my instrument. What I'd hear repeatedly from survivors of sexual assault is that what gives them comfort is being able to tell their story, be listened to, and believed. The experience of being heard and believed frees us from shame and self-blame. At one talkback, a young man raised his hand and asked, "How should I treat someone who's been raped?" A young woman stood up and told him, "Just listen." During the Kavanaugh hearings, I reached out to friends who I knew had been raped. It was shocking to realize there were so many of us. So I don't know why I was surprised and frankly devastated when I came across a Reuters list of the 10 most dangerous countries for women. Number 10 is the United States of America. Our country is the 10th most dangerous country for women. Holy shit! How did I not know that? What conditioning have I undergone that I would be shocked at that? The truth is that even as a privileged white woman, I lived in fear from the time I hit puberty till the time I became a grandmother, right here in our exceptional country. I thought it was just me. I felt like I was a stain on our shining city on the hill. I just worked harder and harder to become a better person. I'd become numb to the violence. Back in the 70s, I was cast as the only woman among a group of gamblers held hostage in a Las Vegas men's room. On the first day of rehearsal, the leading actor, a star, greeted me by wrapping his arms around me and throwing us both to the ground. In Hollywood culture of the time, someone with a little bit of power could get away with all kinds of things. Women had a certain power too, screwing men for jobs and getting them. My manager, Estelle, was all for it. Listen, Toots, it's not going to kill you. And I know the perfect guy. Loves redheads, adores dances. I don't think so. He's smart, he's rich, has a development deal at Paramount. No, he is a perfect gentleman. I can vouch for him. How does anyone really know that? He's my husband. I can't do that. And why not? Because I'm Catholic. Yeah, right. Go ahead. Do things your way. You'll wind up with a writer. We don't have language for talking about sexual violence. Many brave souls are speaking out anyway. Each story adds to the healing. Each step in the direction of truth could lead us to, I don't know, sexual sanity, On one college campus, we met these beautiful young women who told me they'd had abstinence only or no sex education at all. They were anguished, in knots, desperate to know the truth about the nature of sexuality. Obviously, many young men have even less education and more twisted information than the girls. Men make up a surprising number of survivors I meet. They seem to have a harder time admitting they're victims of sexual violence. The shame they feel is complicated by the assault on what they've learned to think of as the core of their masculinity. I have grave concerns for their well-being. Whether we're talking about victims or perpetrators, the demand for boys to be a man is tough on a person with feelings. How could the men who raped me see me as a human being if they were operating without that essential aspect of their humanity? Masculine emotion, including crying, was acceptable in this country through the 19th century, but seemed to change around the time of World War I. Recruitment posters finally defined the requirements for masculinity. The United States Army builds men. The masculine man had to be religious, hardworking and handy, well-built, Christian and white, with weapons. The Army was used as a model of what American men should be and how to judge men in general. In today's world, when men are no longer raised in the image of that macho role model, men whose value has been calculated by their net worth, who've been objectified as workers to be used up and spit out, men who've lost a sense of purpose are bound to be frustrated and angry and feel disconnected. And when men feel less socially dominant, they have a deeper need for recognition. And that's when being a man manifests most primitively as violence. I picture those young men who raped me the first time. They were very young. Maybe it was peer pressure. Were they trying to live up to their idea of what it was to be a man? I'll never know. But I want to prevent the next generations from going through the trauma of sexual violence. I want to get to the root of the problem. Gore Vidal said, to get to the root of anything, you must be radical. The word radical actually comes from the Latin word for root. He went on to say, quote, from a barbaric Bronze Age text known as the Old Testament, 3 anti-human religions have evolved: Judaism, Christianity, Islam. These are sky god religions. They are literally patriarchal. Hence the loathing of women for 2,000 years in those countries afflicted by the sky god and his earthly male delegates. Now, I'm a minister. In seminary, I was full of respect for the teachings of these religions. Do unto others, love your neighbor as yourself. But honestly, they have all failed to give us a unifying vision of the world. The mystical traditions of these religions do teach love, not dogma. The body, the earth, is seen as sacred. The Iroquois, the Hopi, the Minangkabau people of Indonesia are all cultures that have or have had gender equality. And what is it about cultures with gender equality. They have little or no incidence of rape. I relate to ancestors from those long ago cultures. My greats, Dorinda and Irving. I just found out from 23andMe, I'm part Neanderthal. A big part. They hunted and fished together, shared child-rearing chores, had great sex. Look how happy they were. While the men stayed home in their man caves, the women traveled looking for sexual partners. They knew this was a way to prevent inbreeding and to have fun. Look at Dorinda. And Irving doesn't seem to mind at all. Somewhere around my 34th year in therapy, I decided it was time for me to meet the challenge of being in a successful relationship with a man, like Dorinda was. I met one. He was funny and kind, and he wanted a relationship too, but he was not my type. Not my type. What was I thinking? Oh, what does that even mean? Today's generation of kids are way beyond that. They're so open and accepting of each other. They see the same dysfunction of our gender relationships being played out in the destruction of our planet, but they're awake and they're engaged. At our local March for Our Lives demonstration, a teenage 16-year-old, I guess he was, speaker, his voice cracking with pubescent ardor, gave an impassioned speech to a large, diverse crowd. I was especially moved when he reached out to boomers and beyond and said, "Thank you to those on whose shoulders we stand." When he said thank you and included us, I felt sad, thinking about the world we were leaving him. That in spite of all of our years of activism, we were still not leaving our kids a better world. Okay. But now I'm thinking, okay, but we are leaving the world better kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful performance. And your show is filled with such compassion and humor and grace, all while addressing a critical subject. And that you end it with, "We're leaving the world better kids." I love that. I want to talk about that as a turning point in the walk with your son. And I know this is your second show dealing with the subject, and I'd like to hear how these shows came about and bring in your director, Seth Wilpan, into the conversation. But while Joanna and Seth are getting settled, I just want to take a moment to remind the audience that posted in the chat is the tip jar. Very much appreciated in these times. The Marsh receives 70% of its funding through ticket sales, and there are no ticket sales. So any support you're able to give is so much appreciated. And we encourage questions and comments from the audience, which you can post in the chat, and you can do that on Zoom or YouTube, and we'll answer and get to as many as we can. All comments will be sent to the artists, so if we don't get to them, they will be able to see your comments. And our producers, Kristen and David, will help us keep an eye on all that. So now I want to welcome into the conversation Joanna and Seth. I absolutely, Seth, want to read your beautiful bio that you sent because it's just so perfect. This is what I got from Seth. When I got out of the Army, I enrolled at the University of New York at Albany and got the part of Bernie Litko in David Mamet's Sexual Perversity in Chicago. On the night of the second performance, I decided to improvise, which was, of course, disastrous. And it was the night that my director was being graded on his teachers. Anything I do in theater will be in repentance and atonement for that sin. So we're glad you're here. You're getting atonement tonight. So
I hope that this is served as penance, some form of penance.
Well, a good penance, we hope. So first of all, Joanna, there's so much to talk about, and we have a lot of resources that we're going to be sharing in the chat as we talk about these things. A year ago, Joanna, we met with Bridgie Jackson, who the doctor from Baywar, and that's the Bay Area Women Against Rape, but it's the oldest rape crisis center in the country out of Oakland. And we have a lot of information that we can share from her, but also importantly, and we wanted to talk about this with Seth here tonight, and you bring up in your show men victims that don't want to talk about. So there's that aspect, but there's also just the rape culture that we're in. So maybe begin, Joanna, with just first telling us how these shows came about. Or I say these shows, and pardon me, it's because this is your second show that has to do with dealing with these subjects. The first one, Kick. We can get into detail on that whenever you wish.
Yeah, a Kick I wrote, it was called Asking for It originally, about way before Me Too. And I played a lot of colleges, and I played off Broadway. Was nominated too. But anyway, after each performance, people would tell me their stories, and they were just so heartbreaking. And I thought, I mean,
it was about your experience.
Huh?
Tell them what it was about your experience.
It was about my experience. He's directing me on the talk back.
Well, that's what I do.
He's the director.
My experience of
What Kick was about.
Oh, I thought, okay. I think you said what it was about. It was about sexual assault, and it was about rape, rockets, and religion, which this is about rape, rockets, and religion.
Mm-hmm.
But that show is like, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. And then because of all the feedback I was getting from people, survivors, a lot of survivors, men and women, I thought I have to take it a step further. I didn't want to write about sexual assault anymore. But I thought I have to do something and look for ways to heal this. It's so devastating. So that's why Sex and Power came about.
Mm-hmm. So Kick was the first show, and you did, what was the award? It was
Off-Broadway Alliance, OBA Award.
OBA Award. Yeah. Beautiful.
Best performance in a solo play.
Wonderful. I know you went from Cleveland to Edinburgh, and you play 13 characters in that play, and it also is a very powerful story of rape, betrayal, and redemption. With a dash of fiction thrown in, as you put it, and it also is available as a paperback book. So we're going to post both the information in the chat, both for your Sex and Power website that people can access, as well as Kick. And there's your book. Wonderful.
There it is.
Yeah, and I love the logo that with in the theater seats, if you can't see, but she's kind of fallen backwards in the theater.
She's a girl who wanted a career in the theater. Wait, it's getting the
ring
reflection.
light.
she wanted a career in the theater, and it turned her life upside down. My brother came up with that. My brother, Richard Lehman.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So talking about, I had a couple questions about sex and power. First of all, you had mentioned when we spoke about a turning point in carrying your son when he was not wanting to walk up the hill after you'd made the agreement with them. How is that a turning point?
Well, I felt empowered, and I worked very hard and so did his dad. We worked really hard. And we had different parenting styles. But anyway, that was like when he listened to me, and he knew that I wasn't going to take any crap. And and for me, it was empowered. It was like, oh, I can do this. I can parent, and I can give to the world a son who is, I don't know, what's a healthy, whole, happy man.
Non-toxic.
Not what?
Non-toxic.
A non-toxic male.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And even though, and he's magnificent. He's one. Women love him. He loves women. He's just a very funny and loving person, and he's a good dad, and he's a good mom. And he's not a good mom. He's a good dad, and yeah, and a good husband.
Mm-hmm. Lovely.
So that's like, so it was so important to me, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a son, I know. And I was mom and dad since my husband died when he was 5. So, but
Yeah.
Seth, you said something interesting yesterday when we spoke, talking about women and the earth. Could you mention what you said yesterday?
What I said yesterday was that you could substitute the word earth in most places in the play for the word woman, and without missing a beat, because the same ethos of patriarchy that results in domination of women and therefore this mistreatment of women can be applied to our treatment of Mother Earth. And that's is an aspect of a patriarchal dominating society, which is not to say that men are evil, but when men are in a dominating, when men assume a position of domination, which is what patriarchal is, that results in this kind of massive disrespect and destruction of life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's something that we face in this culture we're talking about, as well as in the corporate culture that we have, and the patriarchal culture that we have in the greater world. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So when so I have certain questions, but I want to, let's talk about survivors and how we can support survivors, because I know this topic has so many, can take so many different directions, and how do we support survivors? What is you mentioned in your show, just listen, which is, I think, one of the most important points that can be made, because somebody is confiding in you, and you would just have to kind of stay with them on that path and be a good listener, and perhaps show them your gratitude for sharing something so devastating with them. Joanna, you had a culture of people around you, luckily, because you were a Rockette, and you had a lot of women around you that could be a support. And not everybody has that.
Right. That saved my life was being able to, well, the main thing is, when after that happened, and this is just in kick, when I was raped and I was in the dressing room, I couldn't help but tell my story, because they could see that I was hurt. I was bruised and I was bloody. And but being able to tell that story, and after I left the music hall, I never talked about it. But the fact that I was able to verbalize it right there in the beginning was so healing, because we can go for years and years in denial about what happened to us. Mm-hmm. So I think it's what you say, it's listen, and be there, be there, and just like I say in the play, the experience of being heard and believed does free us from shame and self-blame.
Absolutely.
It's a big, huge thing. So it's very healthy that people are coming out now with their stories.
Absolutely. And if our producer could post the baywar.org, I know that one thing to look for is what people are saying and what they're doing. If signs and symptoms, and they're very common with signs and symptoms of trauma, when people's engagement and participation in with their community is not happening, they're withdrawing, they're losing interest perhaps in things that used to provide them joy, or what are their thoughts? What are they saying? Self-harm thoughts can often be passive and fly under the radar. So, somebody might say, I just can't get it together. It would be better if I weren't here. It doesn't always mean that something said will lead to harmful behaviors, but it involves observing and perhaps asking, why are you feeling this way? Or, paying attention to that sort of thing. So that's all these things are really good way to support survivors. And we have more than we
if
have.
I can interject, I think it's worth noting that the answer wasn't to punish the perpetrators. The answer was listening. I think that relates to the notion of restorative justice. Rather than being punitive, punishing, which is probably a patriarchal approach, a domineering approach. The approach is to listen and to be heard. And that's kind of the basis of restorative justice in general, that parties come together and listen and hear each other and come to some kind of peaceful understanding, which eases the pain of the situation. Whereas retribution, to a great degree, perpetrates it. So I think it's significant to notice that the impact that the female perspective on justice, influence that can have on the greater society.
Thank you for that, Seth. I think that's absolutely great. Yes, and that is so true. How do we? One of the ways to help change our culture, and very good. Thank you.
And I'm thinking about men, because I know so many men who've been through this, and maybe that's one reason that I think it's great to have a man, because when at one talk back, my stage manager had never listened to the story. He had never been near me, but I was signing books and listening to people's stories. And because Robert was there, this man told his story, and he told it to Robert. He was like, oh, to be accepted by a man, to have a man listen to a man's story was really a big thing. It was very healing for this person who stayed and I believe kept in touch. Yeah.
So with rape and sexual violence, and again, I want to mention that things have been 300% in some places on the rise, sexual violence and domestic violence, since the pandemic began. This is an international crisis, really, and that the UN has called for an end to the war on the home front. And that was happening when it started at COVID a year ago, and we're looking at very frightening figures now, and about 5 to 10% of victims are men. Is that right?
Well, at least, men don't often speak of it, and in some cultures, men, especially during times of war, have been raped repeatedly with permanent wounds, and then they're outcasts in their culture. Mm-hmm. So it's probably more, but I don't know what it is, but I think it's just to say to someone, are you okay? Like you were saying, if somebody's withdrawing, and I think it's important to reach out, like people who are holed up during COVID, to give a call yeah.
Mm-hmm. let's talk about, you gave us some wonderful resources and so grateful for these. Men Can Stop Rape, and which is posted in the chat, and an app for men against rape. Do you want to talk about that?
Do you?
I stopped a long time ago.
Well, I would say I'm so happy that there are these groups. And when I was looking this up, I also saw MOST and the Men of Strength. And there are groups working in campuses all over the country, both, I think, high school as well as college, where the young men get together and they form groups and they to eliminate sexual violence on their campuses. And so there's many good programs out there for men and boys to change our culture just in the way that you're doing with your show. And I'm so glad that there are these resources in addition to the good work that you're doing in bringing this to the forefront, because it's another pandemic. I mean, it's an ongoing problem that we've had in our culture for, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years, perhaps. And but we can change it. And
yes,
men and women together working together.
Yes. And when Lynn and I started working on Kick,
Lynn Taylor
Corbett, yes, there was very little of this participation by men's groups on campus, because we did these things on campus and it was just maybe starting, but now they're really, these kids, I really mean it, I think we're leaving better kids, because they really are involved in social justice and yeah. And also we need to, as far as policy goes, the ERA, we're trying to get the ERA passed, but it has to go through the Senate, because they don't want to make it was supposed to be over in 1982, was it? And then they
but that was not written into the bill. Typically, the amendment is written into it the expiration date by which it has to be passed. But that wasn't written into that amendment. But the judiciary made a random decision to say that it expired. So the Congress now has the capacity to overrule that decision by the judiciary.
But there's a lot of resistance to it. And there's also resistance to the Violence Against Women Act being restored.
So why do you think that is, when we know that there are, where you do have equality in countries, there isn't the sexual violence that we experience in this country and in other countries, of course?
Well, Iceland I think is number one for gender equality. And the Nordic countries have gender equality. They still do have high incidence of rape now. That's part of it is because they feel safer reporting it. But culturally, it takes a long time to shift.
Sure.
That they have all the laws are in place, but people still are in the old ways, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something to strive for, and there have been cultures that have done it. As it's even in the excerpts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like with the Violence Against Women Act in this country, and that was Biden's thing. The NRA is against it because all they want to do is add, because there's a thing in the Violence Against Women Act that says it's for partners, boyfriends and partners, and they want to expand that to dates and stalkers, that they are also going to be held responsible, but they can't have a gun. That's what it is. It's you can't have a gun if you're have a record of violence against a partner or something. So they want, I mean, we want to expand it to include dates and stalkers, but the NRA feels, well, they're going to lose all those gun sales. So it's hanging there, So those are two things that would really help us get behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Virginia was the 38th state to pass the what?
ERA.
Yeah, the equal rights. So it could be done. It could be done if they just let the time, if they just do it.
Yeah, it can be done. So how do each of us participate in that? And I want to make sure that somebody put the boyfriend loophole. Oh, pardon me, Kristen had asked about resources, but we did mention most men of strength on the campuses. But the boyfriend loophole, I think I'd have to know what.
It's the boyfriend loophole in the Violence Against Women Act, the one that they don't want to extend to dates and
yes, it's the loophole in the Violence Against Women Act.
Yeah, the NRA is against that. Now they're getting weaker, so maybe write more letters. We have to just do just stay on top of it.
I want to another post that will go up in the chat is RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. And they have a national sexual assault hotline 24/7. I think you might post the number. The RAIN continues to be available by phone and online chat for survivors and loved ones. And services are always free, confidential, and available 24/7. And Men Against Rape, I'm not as familiar with the group, but I really appreciate what you were saying about empowering, and we have to find the equality and change the patriarchy and empower our children. How more can men? Oh, I also want to mention, importantly, this is April. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and here in San Francisco, but I believe it's a virtual walk, so it can be anywhere. There is a virtual walk on April 24th, so that also will be posted into the chat. What other ideas or feedback do you have, Seth, in regard to that from your perspective?
Well, I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but we live in a patriarchal culture that exists, that survives on the basis of dominating nature. And as long as we continue, all of us, as long as we continue to live that way, we're kind of fighting an uphill battle. We're swimming against upstream to try to expunge a culture of rape, because we demonstrate it in every other aspect. Other than, we're focusing on human relationships, but as long as we continue to live it out in our relationships with the rest of nature, it's still going to be a glorified, or at least legitimized approach to living. And we're always going to be fighting an uphill battle to expunge it from particular areas of our life. I think we have to broaden our perspective a little bit and realize that men and women alike are participating in a culture that's based on domination.
Absolutely. And predation.
Right.
Where it's okay for the man to be aggressive and I don't know if it's happening anymore, but when I was a youth and I had a friend who was raped, and the policeman just said, that's what you get for wearing a dress. Now, I think our culture has changed since then. Somewhat, hopefully, but we have a long way to go. We certainly have a
Yeah.
long way to go.
Yeah.
So what are some other grassroots ideas? I think just doing this show is one of the most brilliant ideas, I think, because we can talk about it. I'm so impressed at the compassion that you have, even talking about the gang rape in Central City, in Central Park, rather, and how young the boys were. And at one point, I know you said you even, were thinking, forgive them as a good Catholic. They know not what they do.
That's right. That's in the play. Yeah.
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 And straight out of the Bible there, and the things that we think, but in some ways, I suppose that really helps.
Oh, that totally helped me. I'm so glad I actually, aside from telling the girls in the dressing room, while it was happening, and I was saying, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they do, the words were the beginning of the healing.
Mm-hmm.
To forgive them was the beginning of my healing. Of course, it's taken all these years, but still, that was a key thing, I think.
And
But
then
you've
you
come
can
out.
compare that to a feeling of wanting revenge and retribution. So it's another instance where forgiveness has power. It's a nonviolent power. It's a transformative power. So we could all practice forgiveness as a way of wielding nonviolent power against,
Mm-hmm.
as a countervailing force against the powers that would seek retribution, an eye for an eye.
And I noticed under COVID, so many, Spirit Rock and Deepak Chopra, and all the meditation groups and the Ram Dass culture and a lot, they really, really have stepped up their programming for people in isolation, and to really just focus on what you said. How can we be mindful and awaken ourselves and work, and we have to work to awaken ourselves. And it's really a grassroots thing. We live in a culture where we have to pass a bill for anything to happen. And certainly, rape isn't legal, but there's always bills for something, but it really, it comes to the human heart, and how do we treat each other as human beings, and when we see man's inhumanity to man or women, how do we overcome this?
Yeah, Matthew Fox's book it's the male. What is it? The male.
The spiritual life.
The spiritual life of
sacred masculinity, something like that. Matthew Fox.
Sacred masculinity.
Sacred masculinity. Thank you. Kristen asks, and this is a great question, what's it like for women entering Broadway culture now as performers? Is it any different than when you entered?
Oh, I think it's better. I mean, it was, well, the good thing about musicals and everything is everybody was gay, and it was wonderful. But the producers and other people, it's just like, and being a dancer, oh my God, being a dancer is like, well, you were wearing a skirt. It's like, well, you're a dancer. Look at those legs. It's going to happen. So it was bad when I was coming up. I think it's better now. They had an incident in West Side Story, and the young woman spoke about it, and well, now everything's closed. So I don't know how that's going to resolve itself. But I mean, in our day, we would shut up because we would never work again. You're not going to tell on somebody that could possibly be in a job-giving position.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, having lived through many decades, I think the 70s and the 60s were so scary.
Why? I mean, what context are you saying? Just in terms of the open?
Well, Broadway, you're coming home late. So
I
there's
see.
that. So that line, I lived in fear from the time I hit puberty to the time I became a grandmother, is true. I mean, it was just, you were like a walking target or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's way better now since Me Too, and since, people are, even though there's still a lot of mishigas, it's a little better for performers.
Yes, it is. And the Me Too movement is so important, as we're seeing, as we are seeing also the fights for, racial justice as well.
Right.
Our time has flown by. Do you have any points that you wanted to make that we didn't touch upon? Because it's just about time for us to say goodbye.
Well, happy anniversary. I want to say to us.
Yes, thank you for being there. Our first performer.
That was the scariest thing. To do Zoom without ever having done Zoom was really, really scary.
We were all right in there with Stephanie. We just were like, let's jump in, and she got us, inspired us, and it's been a really.
And I want to say thank you to you for starting Solo Arts Heal, because it has been healing. It's been so healing this year to have our wonderful group, Rhonda and Valerie and Sam and Bob
and
Suzanne and Diane and Stephanie. It's just been. Somebody asked, like, how are you getting? Oh, I know. I had to fill out the 9/11 Health Commission. Every year you have to fill out, how your health is mentally and physically and everything. You fill out this big long form, and it asks if you had a support system during COVID, and I said yes. Thank you.
Oh, how
Solo Arts Heal. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great support for me. It's been very, very rewarding to be able to work with you all, and I'm so grateful to you. So, and Seth, thank you so much too for joining us tonight. Very, very happy to have this conversation with both of you. And your performance was so beautiful and so moving and full of emotion, Joanna. Really,
thank you.
Really appreciate your work so much. And
thank you.
So,
we start shooting the full length. We start shooting the movie, like in a couple weeks.
Oh,
the Sex and Power
fantastic.
movie. Yeah.
Oh, and also, I just want to mention that you just had a premiere of a new play, Home Sweet Homeland, which is absolutely fabulous and wonderful. So people will be able, I didn't have the link for that, but people can
That's
find
off
it.
now. Now it has to get another producer.
Oh, okay.
But we're really reaching out and hoping, because it's, it's that intense work that we did together apart. We have no group hug, or it feels like such a letdown after. But
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
After these shows, I'm usually at least calling, give you a virtual hug, because there's no backstage. It's tough.
Yeah.
We're all looking forward to the times when we can hug again.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much again
for
tonight's featured presentation of Sex and Power. And do look for Joanna's shows and more on her website, sexandpower.life. I love that it's sexandpower.life. And on the Marshstream YouTube platform at themarsh.org. And next week, join us as we celebrate Earth Day with Hai Ting Chin. And we are going to see the groundbreaking show Astronautica, The Voices of Women in Space. It's a newly commissioned work of music, voice, and video by women composers, with a libretto drawn from the words of women who have traveled in outer space and seen our world from a dramatic new perspective. Astronautica is an artistic evocation of the transformation that happens when one sees our small planet set against the endless blackness of space, without borders, without the official boundaries that divide and could well destroy humankind. It's performed by women from the trio Triumphatrix, Lindsay Kesselman, Hai Ting Chin, and Kirsten Solik. Please join us next week for that. It's going to be a wonderful show as we celebrate Earth Day. And again, thanks to our featured guests, Joanna Rush, Seth Wilpan, and for Sex and Power. And thank you to Marstream producers, Christine Scheel and David Harada, and of course, Marsh founder, artistic director, Stephanie
Wiseman.
Thank you so much. We're so
Thank
grateful
you.
for you for this year. And our Zoom and YouTube audiences, of course. We're all in this together.
So please stay on. I mean, what a birthday celebration. And Joanna, what a great show. And I have to say, you have grown since that first
We all have.
We all have grown together.
But I love that we did it. I love the jumper thing.
Yeah, we had to go. We had to do it. And we had to be healing the world.
Yep.
Heal the world, heal yourself.
And Gail, what an incredible host you have been, and all the wonderful things. Oh my goodness, the wonderful shows we have had over this year. I mean, Kristen put together this slideshow of it's like, what, 50, 48 shows? Maybe we did a few reruns.
Thank you so much for that, for doing that. That's fabulous. And I want to see it again.
Amazing the shows. Maybe Kristen can just run it at the end again. I don't know if she's set up to do that, but why doesn't she? And people can watch or not watch, because I think it's quite long, because it's so many shows. So thank you. Can't wait. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for being this Solo Arts Heal community and making the broadcast show out of this group that started a couple of years now at APAP. Just a wonderful thing. So please make a tip if you're here. Come back tomorrow night, because I think, one of the things we're doing health, and it's great that we can support the Asian community with this roundtable tomorrow. I think it's going to be really, really something. And it was great. I had a tech rehearsal with the poets today, and, hearing a little bit from the always wild Clyde Always, if you haven't seen him or any of the other poets, about what it's been like for them. They had no idea he had no idea how important it was for him to be able to perform every week in his cafe, and all the poetry events had gone during COVID and just coming back now. So thank you again. See you tomorrow.
I look forward to it. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody,
Bye.
hello. Bye-bye.
Bye.